very first thing that we need to do when creating the animation of our walk cycle is to create a scene. We need to ensure that we've defined the ground plane that a character is going to be walked on. This ground plane serves as a reference point as to where we need to put our heel, the ball of our foot, and our toe. It also gives us a good proportional guide as to how far the hips need to go up and down inside the movement of the animation itself. These scene elements are super important, and we can't start animating until we've defined this ground plane. I've provided you guys with a wonderful little reference image that you're more than welcome to use to help draw your character and to establish the basic skeletal system of this movement. It includes a small little ground plane in there, and I think I'm going to use that as a background object inside of my scene to help me very quickly craft and create some shapes in my Blender animation. Let's just do it real fast. Now to start, we need to import in a background photograph into my animation scene file. And we can do that real easily just by starting off by jumping into object mode. Because whenever you start a new 2D animation file, it automatically defaults into the draw mode. Well, we want to create a new object that includes a photograph. Now, because we're going to be drawing on top of this object, it's a really good idea to maybe use a background image versus a reference image. At times, you'll find some really kind of weird wonkiness, if you will, when using a reference image, that the strokes kind of go behind the image, and I certainly don't want that. So let's do this. Let's go into the Add pull-down menu at the top of the viewport and choose Image and then Background. Navigate to where you've saved the image on your computer. And this image is inside your bundle of learning resources. It's called Walk Cycle Character Reference. Let's load it as a background object. And this is what it looks like. It's just sitting right here in the center of my canvas in Blender. With it selected, and I know I have it selected because it's highlighted over here in my outliner, I'm just going to activate the Scale tool by tapping the S key on my keyboard and just drag my mouse until I'm happy with the size of my character inside the scene itself. And that's a pretty good start. I'm happy with that. And you can see from the photograph here that there's a small little indication of a ground plane. I created this image inside of Blender, and I remember when I made it, I was just using a simple line tool. So let's return to our grease pencil object in the outliner so we can start layering in this information inside of our 2D animation file. Now I'm going to go into my animation layers here real fast and just get rid of all of the default animation layers that come with every single 2D animation Blender file. Let's just hit the minus key, let's get rid of them. And of course we need to start building our own animation layers, so let's go ahead and add a new one. If we double click on the name, we can rename it to Ground. There we go, happy with that. As one might imagine, we're going to be putting all of the strokes and the drawing information for the ground or the set in this one animation layer, which is a good practice. Let's jump into draw mode, grab the line tool, and just very quickly drag out. I'm going to hold down the shift key, drag out a straight line. Now I don't like the size of the radius, so let's make this a little bit bigger. And I certainly don't like the color. I want to make it a strength of 100%. Yeah, that's a little bit better. If you hold down the shift key while you're dragging out a stroke, it's going to constrain it to a perfectly horizontal line. And then don't forget to hit the return key to confirm it. Let's go into the edit mode. And I'm in my stroke selection engine way up over here at the top. That way I can grab the entirety of my stroke versus the individual points that are used to comprise the stroke. And I think I'm just going to move it down just ever so slightly. Yeah, I was a little high, somewhere right around there, and that's a good place to begin. Now this bottom part, I just used a gradient. I made a box and I made a gradient. You could do that too. I think that's a great little addition to our workflow that'll help our audience remind themselves that this is a three-dimensional space that has some depth in it, which is pretty neat. But you don't necessarily have to do that for your animation. Now the other thing that I'm looking at when it comes to my scene file here is the materials that I'm using. And I like to start off my entire system with a good series of materials, a good framework, if you will, already in place. So when I'm creating, I don't have to worry about it. Let's jump into our material area, and here are all of the default materials that come with every 2D animation file. And let's start eliminating some that we know we're not going to need. I don't think I want dot stroke, so let's get rid of that one by hitting the minus sign. Same with square stroke. We're not going to need that. but solid stroke and solid fill, we're probably going to need those, and specifically for the character and for this back leg. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to, let's do this. I'm going to change the name of the default solid fill material to gray leg. We'll just call it gray or back. And then we'll do a front. So the objects that are tagged with the back material are going to be the background objects. So the back arm and the back leg. Now we're going to give it a little bit of a stroke. What color do we want it to be? We'll make it black just so it kind of matches what's already been done. And then we're also going to have another material. And let's give it a new name. And since we're sticking with the back and front system, we'll call this one called front. And we want it to be filled in. Let's open up the properties. And this one's going to be white. We're going to keep it very, very simple and very, very basic. So we got a front material that's got a black stroke and a white fill. Then we got a back material that's got a black stroke and a gray fill. And I'm going to make this gray a little bit darker so that it kind of generally matches the illustration that we have. So this is a really great scene setup process. We've created a ground plane. We've created materials. We've also created the animation layers that we're going to need. We're ready to start drawing with accuracy and with efficiency as we start to block out and plan all of the key frames and poses for our little walk cycle animation.